There's an old expression, excuses are like assholes, everyone has one. Well, that couldn't be truer than in the world of sports, where proud men and women will tell you anything but the truth to justify things such as a poor performance. Whether it's Barry Bonds claiming to believe that flaxseed oil made his head grow to the size of a pumpkin, or famed Man United manager Alex Ferguson believing the kits his team were wearing were bad luck, sports is chock full of some of the most off the wall, quote unquote, explanations. And of course, boxing in specific is no different. In fact, in a sport full of characters, boxing may have some of the most insane excuses in all of sports. Here, we've ranked the top 10 excuses made in the sport of boxing. Number 10, Marco Huck stinks. It's safe to say athletes can get a bit smelly during a contest. It makes sense. They are putting in an incredible amount of physical effort and exertion. And while blood, sweat, and tears sounds like a cool slogan you might find on a fighter's shirt, it's not exactly the sort of concoction that one would choose to smell. So you have to feel for former cruiserweight kingpin Marco Huck when former heavyweight titleist Alexander Povetkin claimed he stunk. Back in February of 2012, the pair met in a heavyweight contest that ultimately saw Povetkin win a rather dull affair over the distance. After the fight, in an interview with a Russian media outlet, Alexander Zimin, trainer for Povetkin, stated Huck smelled badly and implies he used some sort of substance to reach such a level of stench. In round 5, I noticed that Povetkin's eyes became dim. When I asked him what's wrong, he said Huck's body was radiating such bad stinking that it made my fighter's head go round and round. I don't think that Huck's body just happened to produce such a powerful stench. Just think about how bad a fighter must smell. Now think of how bad Huck would have to have smelled to make a fellow fighter's performance slip noticeably. Personally, I choose to believe Huck was innocent and would never sink solo. He actually just really smells that awful. Number 9. David Haye toes the line. For months, even years, cruiserweight turned heavyweight titleist David Haye chased the biggest money fight he could find, a bout with then Supreme Heavyweight Champion Vladimir Klitschko. Ultimately, the bout came to fruition in the summer of 2011 when the rock-fisted big men met in a highly anticipated grudge match in Hamburg, Germany. While the fight itself left much to be desired, the post-fight shenanigans of Haye left most claiming they had enough. Haye, telling just about anyone that would listen, explained that he simply couldn't land his devastating right-hand shots because he had injured the baby toe on his right foot. I thought adrenaline would get me through it, but it was tough. It's incredibly frustrating. We were thinking about pulling out 3 weeks ago, but we couldn't with all of these great fans here. Quite naturally, none of those great fans seemed interested in hearing that a toe had made them feel like they flushed all that expensive ticket money down the toilet. Number 8. Foreman's friend turned foe. In one of the most memorable showdowns in boxing's history, fans were treated to one of the most clever acts of strategy the sport had seen up to that point. In 1974's Rumble in the Jungle, heavyweight Muhammad Ali utilized his now famous rope-a-dope tactic to regain world champion status. Then champion George Foreman punched himself out while Ali covered up and moved before unloading when Foreman was tired and ready to go. Ali would go on to stop the previously unbeaten monster in the middle rounds. In the years following the loss, Foreman has come up with a handful of excuses to explain away his first defeat. Everything from being drugged prior to the fight to the ropes being tampered with by the camp of Ali. However, the funnest one that doesn't involve criminal activity is the one where Foreman claims he witnessed a friend rooting for Ali during the fight in the middle of the crowd, which ultimately resulted in an inability to finish the fight strong. Because who amongst us hasn't been whooping someone's ass only to see our friend cheer for the other guy and it ends up demoralizing us, right? Number 7. Cintron and Martinez don't gel. If you're an admirer of Sergio Martinez but don't have a lot of time to go back and watch many of his performances, watch his bout with Kermit Cintron from February of 2009. This would be a good place to start, and you will effectively witness Martinez win twice in one fight. The only problem is that he'll get no credit for either stopping Cintron in the 7th round, which he definitely, certainly did, or for outboxing him for the entirety of the contest, which again, he definitely, certainly did. One would think Cintron would be happy just escaping with a highly questionable majority draw and keep it all the way moving. But no. Instead, Cintron felt the need to come up with a very fun reason for why he performed so poorly. In a press release following the fight, Cintron said, "I'd like to get a rematch with Sergio Martinez." Some people disputed the draw. Look, the guy wore so much hair gel and mousse that the fumes were making me dizzy, and I still managed to put it on him in only 6 weeks' notice. Let's clear the air for good. With an 8-week camp, I knock him out. Simple as that. Well, on the plus side, a rematch would have sort of been a trilogy fight, but alas, the fight never came to fruition. Number 6, Oscar's Bad Oysters. In June of 2000, one of the sport's most anticipated bouts of the era, Californians Oscar De La Hoya and Shane Mosley met up in what was expected to be one hell of a fight. While it wasn't an all-out war, the fight was certainly compelling, and ultimately Mosley did just enough to win a close affair after 12 frames. All in all, it was a normal contest with a normal verdict, and one assumed a rematch was inevitable. And it was. However, both fighters had fights in between said return, and prior to his bout with Arturo Gatti in March of 2001, De La Hoya had a rather unusual reason for his loss to friend Mosley. It was that damn oyster I ate the night before the fight. It made me sick to my stomach. Couple things. How would he know that? Why would he be so casually eating seafood before a major contest, even if it were true? How is having a tummy ache better than just losing to the better man on the night? All strange stuff here. No word on if he used his famous fishnets to catch the aforementioned oysters. Number 5. Pacquiao wore the wrong socks. Sadly, one of the sport's most gracious winners is also one of its most excuse-filled losers. Over the years, surefire Hall of Famer Manny Pacquiao has blamed everything from a bum shoulder to not being able to be focused and using the wrong gloves. However, it's his first encounter with ultimate rival Juan Manuel Marquez that birthed his most exceptional excuse. After dropping the Mexican 3 times in the first round, he struggled to match the technique of Marquez for the vast majority of the contest, ultimately settling for a controversial draw. Shortly thereafter, in a blog for the website of his then promoter Top Rank, Pacquiao discussed the loss and claimed that thin socks were the cause of his downward spiral of a performance. Toward the latter rounds, because I was wearing socks that were very thin, I had developed blisters on my feet, making it very difficult for me to move as effectively as I had during the earlier rounds. I had to fight more flat footed than we had trained. After the fight, when I took my boots off, my socks were worn through and they were very bloody. Sure, that doesn't exactly explain how Pacquiao never quite figured out Marquez throughout the entire trilogy, but okay. Besides, socks are no excuse. And I know this because both Manny and Freddie Roach, Pacquiao's longtime trainer, once laughed off the idea that Timothy Bradley had injured himself while not wearing socks in his 2012 encounter with the Filipino politician. Number 4. Too many Japanese girls. If you're any sort of boxing fan, you've watched the iconic Rocky movie at least once, or even, say, 1,000 times. Literally every time it's on. That would mean you know one thing, if nothing else: women weaken legs. Which makes it all the more shocking that former heavyweight world champion Mike Tyson, a boxing encyclopedia, would fall victim to the fair sex's leg weakening ways. However, according to the Brooklynite, that's exactly what happened prior to his first professional loss. In 1990, and perhaps the biggest upset in the sport's history, Tyson was beaten soundly and stopped by unheralded Buster Douglas at the Tokyo Dome in Japan. For weeks following the unthinkable upset, fans and media members alike threw every possible explanation out there to explain how this could have been. According to Tyson, it was pretty damn simple. Later recalling his downfall, Tyson was as honest as, well, he was Mike Tyson honest. I was fucking those Japanese girls like I was eating grapes. You thought I was Caesar. You thought I was Caligula, how I was out there in Japan. Well, I didn't, but I do now. Remember, kids, women weaken legs. Number 3, Roy Jones loses for his father. Everyone has heard the story of a boxer making his or her way up all the ranks, getting that title shot, winning that world honor, and dedicating that victory to a loved one, a parent, typically. It's the stuff boxing movies are made of. It's a truly heartwarming story and one that makes all the sense in the world. Your mother or father, for example, sacrificed so much for you that it's only right you pay them an acknowledgement. Of course, boxing isn't a movie. Boxing is insane. And boxing is filled with characters like Roy Jones who think, shall we say, just a little bit differently. In 2003, Jones had become a bona fide superstar by traveling from light heavyweight all the way up to heavyweight to capture a portion of the crown with a defeat to John Ruiz. Still, he wasn't a true heavyweight and was ultimately forced to move back down to a more natural weight. Besides, it made financial sense because a loudmouth rival by the name of Antonio Tarver was waiting at 175 pounds to do the unthinkable. Initially, Tarver almost pulled off the massive upset in November of the same year, but came up short on the card. Still, more than ever before, a fighter had kept it close with Jones, and fans wanted the return. And in that return, Tarver landed the left hand that turned the boxing world upside down, stopping Jones in the second frame in the upset of the year. After the two-fight series, Jones suggested that moving down so fast in weight had left him feeling sluggish and lethargic. While it's hard to know for sure, it seemed a logical explanation and many considered it close enough to the truth. However, the pair would ultimately meet again in 2005, and the excuse Jones made for inevitably losing the rubber match is where things get fun. Cornered by his father, Roy Jones Sr., a man with whom Roy had a tumultuous relationship, to say the least, Jones later expressed that he really wasn't all that interested in winning the fight. Fearing that his father would take all the credit if he won, Jones sorta kind of claimed to throw the contest. I mean, he wouldn't come out and say it completely, but the implication was there. I've heard of biting your own nose to spite your face, but how about letting a large athletic man punch you in the nose and facial region for half an hour so you can spite your egotistical father? That's a new one. Number two, spinal. You know an excuse is good when a single word likely reveals the number two spot on our list. Making his second appearance on this countdown as former heavyweight champion and the last guy Evander Holyfield would ever trust to tell him a secret, Iron Mike Tyson. In his bout with Clifford Etienne in 2003, Tyson made his night's work short with a first round stoppage. However, for some reason, the American wasn't completely thrilled with the performance. So much was Tyson hoping for a better showing, he came up with a rather unorthodox reason for not looking a bit better. I broke my back, Tyson said, before a hilariously long pause. My back is broken. When asked by longtime post fight interviewer Jim Gray just what in the blue hell he actually meant, Tyson capped the brilliant excuse with a single word: spinal. Again, making things even more absurd was the fact that this was Tyson's excuse for a poor performance in a winning effort. Tyson's explanation for how he broke his back was relatively vague, though I personally feel as though the hundreds of Japanese girls he had probably had something to do with it. Before we get to the number one here, there is an honorable mention, and that honor goes out to Karl Froch and his Danish volcano. If you care to hear the full story, it's worth a quick Google. Short version: volcanic activity delayed Froch's arrival in Denmark for his fight with Mikkel Kessler in April of 2010. Froch would arrive later in the week than expected and lose a close decision over 12 rounds. The only reason it doesn't quite make the list is that a fighter arriving in a foreign land later than expected could have a legit impact on his performance. Fighters do prefer to acclimate a little longer than just a few days. Still, it is fun to think about a boxer saying that a volcano made him lose. There is something there. And number one, Chris Eubank Sr. hates hypnosis. Okay, this one is a doozy. Chris Eubank, in a defense of his long-held portion of the super middleweight title, was set to take on Steve Collins in March of 1995, and that is where the normal portion of this story ends. During the build-up to the fight, Collins and his team convinced the press and a noticeably bothered Eubank that he would be hypnotized for the duration of their upcoming encounter. Unnerved by the news, Eubank stated in several interviews leading up to the contest that he felt this shouldn't be allowed in the sport of boxing. In fact, he went further. I understand getting in the ring with a man that is trained to be the best he can be, but under hypnosis, basically, you will be more. And mentally, you are in a trance, and every time you should stop, what's going to happen? There has to be a line drawn here. Three things made this all the funnier. Firstly, Collins kept us going all the way into the fight, never moving out of his corner and literally acting like Eubank didn't exist during his entrance, wearing headphones to distract himself. Secondly, it was made even more fun by the fact that Eubank brought this before the British Boxing Board of Control, because of course he did. But the best part about this excuse is that it's the ever rare pre-fight excuse, where the fighter already lets you know there might be a reason things won't go his way. To his credit, Collins has effectively admitted this was a plan to beat the mind games expert at his own practice, though that does sound like something someone in a trance would say to begin with. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. What are some of your favorite excuses? Do you think I got it right? What would you have added or taken off the list? Let me know in the comments down below. And of course, make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'd greatly appreciate it. And until next time.